see what to do.
Keep away!
This hour is mine. Fuck me!
There are films that scare, and then there are films that haunt. The Exorcist belongs firmly in the latter. Released in 1973 and directed by William Friedkin, this supernatural horror masterpiece sent shockwaves through audiences, redefining what fear looked like in cinema. But beyond the spinning heads, guttural voices, and scenes that made viewers faint in theaters, The Exorcist also gave us performances that were deeply human, profoundly unsettling, and, in hindsight, unforgettable. This wasn't just a horror movie, it was a cultural phenomenon. It broke box office records, faced bans, sparked theological debates, and earned 10 Academy Award nominations, including one for Best Picture, a rare feat for a horror film. Yet what gives The Exorcist its enduring legacy isn't only the demon inside Regan, or the infamous head turn, it's the gravity brought by its cast. They were more than actors. They were the soul of the story. And today, many of them are no longer with us. As we revisit the eerie corridors of that Georgetown home and the trembling rituals of faith versus evil, we also take a moment to look back at the lives behind the characters. Who were the people who brought these unforgettable roles to life? What did they carry with them off screen, their passions, their struggles, and ultimately, their final chapters? In this video, we remember 6 key members of the Exorcist cast who have since passed away. From the gravitas of Max von Sydow to the haunted intensity of Jason Miller, each left behind a legacy far greater than a single film. Their performances, wrapped in myth and shadow, still echo in the dark corners of cinema history. Join us as we uncover the stories of these remarkable actors, the demons they fought on screen, and the human stories they lived off it. Max von Sydow, the holy warrior who carried centuries in his eyes. Max von Sydow didn't just play Father Moran, he embodied him. With a presence so grave it seemed sculpted from centuries of faith and suffering, von Sydow brought a towering depth to The Exorcist. At just 44 years old during filming, he was made up to appear much older, and yet, even without the makeup, you believed this was a man who had stared into ancient evil. His performance was quiet, controlled, but devastating. He wasn't fighting a demon. He was battling the weight of belief itself. Born in Sweden in 1929, von Sydow rose to international acclaim through his collaborations with director Ingmar Bergman, most notably in The Seventh Seal, 1957, where he famously played chess with death. That role, like Father Moran, demanded a stoic confrontation with existential darkness, and von Sydow delivered with an otherworldly calm. His European gravitas brought something unique to American cinema, making him a staple in both art house films and Hollywood blockbusters. Over the years, he moved effortlessly between languages, genres, and continents, appearing in everything from The Greatest Story Ever Told to Minority Report to Game of Thrones. But it was The Exorcist that immortalized him in popular culture. Unlike many horror roles, Father Moran wasn't sensationalized. He was respected, even revered. And von Sydow's portrayal gave the film its spiritual backbone. Max von Sydow passed away in March 2020 at the age of 90. With his passing, cinema lost one of its most intellectual and enigmatic performers, a man who brought the divine and the damned into the same frame with quiet dignity. In death, as in life, he remains a figure of mystery and strength. Jason Miller, the tormented priest who couldn't escape his own demons. Jason Miller was not a movie star in the traditional sense. When he stepped into the role of Father Karras in The Exorcist, he had never acted in a film before. A playwright by trade, having won the Pulitzer Prize for that championship season, Miller brought an intensity to the screen that was raw, deeply human, and painfully real. His Karras wasn't a stereotypical hero priest. He was a man of faith in crisis, burdened by guilt, grief, and a crumbling belief in God. And it was that authenticity that made his performance unforgettable. From the moment he appears on screen, Miller radiates a kind of internal disintegration. His eyes carry the exhaustion of spiritual doubt, and his quiet scenes, especially those with his ailing mother, are among the most emotionally devastating in the film. It's no surprise that his performance earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. What is surprising is how reluctant Miller was to pursue Hollywood fame afterward. He turned down offers that could have made him a household name, choosing instead to return to the stage and write. But Miller's own life, much like Karras's, was filled with shadows. He struggled with alcoholism for much of his adult years, and his personal relationships were often turbulent. He was married to actress Jackie Gleason's daughter and later fathered actor Jason Patric, though their relationship was distant. In many ways, Miller seemed haunted, not by demons, but by a restlessness and dissatisfaction that followed him long after The Exorcist's success. Jason Miller died suddenly of a heart attack in 2001 at the age of 62. He had spent his final years directing and acting in theater in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where he remained a beloved local figure. His portrayal of Father Karras, broken yet brave, skeptical yet self-sacrificing, stands today as one of the most complex characters ever portrayed in horror cinema. And like the final fall he takes down those steps in Georgetown, Miller's life was marked by a quiet, tragic descent, but one that ended with undeniable courage. Lee J. Cobb, the bulldog detective with a soul beneath the badge. When Lee J. Cobb entered The Exorcist as Lieutenant William Kinderman, he brought more than just a detective's grit, he brought decades of cinematic authority. With his stocky build, gruff voice, and knowing eyes, Cobb's portrayal of Kinderman offered a necessary anchor in a film consumed by spiritual terror. He wasn't there to banish demons or recite scripture. He was there to ask questions, slowly, methodically, almost gently, until the truth unraveled itself. In a film of priests and possessions, Cobb was the weary voice of reason, grounded in the real world. Born in 1911 in New York City, Cobb had one of the most formidable careers in mid-20th century American cinema. A founding member of the legendary group theater, he helped define method acting before it had a name. His roles in On the Waterfront and 12 Angry Men are still studied today. Cobb specialized in tough, conflicted men. Union bosses, jurors, patriarchs, characters whose rage always hinted at a buried vulnerability. Off-screen, he wasn't far removed from the intensity he portrayed. He faced investigation during the McCarthy era, initially refusing to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, only to later name names, a choice that haunted him. By the time he played Kinderman in The Exorcist, Cobb was already in the twilight of his career. Yet his presence was as magnetic as ever. His scenes, especially those opposite Jason Miller, were filled with dry wit and unexpected tenderness. He approached the role with the restraint of a seasoned artist, turning what could have been a stock character into someone unforgettable. Lee J. Cobb passed away in 1976 at the age of 64, just 3 years after The Exorcist was released. His death marked the end of an era, a time when actors roared onto the screen with gravitas, not spectacle. And in The Exorcist, Cobb left behind one final gift. A detective who, in the face of unthinkable evil, simply kept asking the right questions. Mercedes McCambridge, the voice from hell and the pain behind it. Though she never appeared on screen in The Exorcist, Mercedes McCambridge's contribution may be the most viscerally unforgettable of all. As the demonic voice that possessed young Reagan, her guttural growls, chilling laughter, and blasphemous snarls terrified a generation. Her voice was the devil. And it was so convincing, so inhuman, that many believed it had been heavily manipulated or synthesized. But the terrifying truth? It was all her. A respected actress with a booming, raspy vocal range, McCambridge had long been known as one of the great radio performers of the 1940s and 50s. She won an Academy Award for her supporting role in All the King's Men, 1949, and starred alongside legends like Joan Crawford and Johnny Guitar. But by the time The Exorcist came along, her star had faded, and she took the voice role under strict physical and psychological conditions. To achieve the sound of a demon in torment, she swallowed raw eggs, chain-smoked, and even requested to be tied to a chair during recording sessions to capture the sensation of possession. Yet despite her immense contribution, McCambridge's name was initially left off the credits, a slight that led to a public legal battle. She argued that her work was central to the film's impact, and the studio eventually relented. But the incident exposed deeper wounds. McCambridge had battled alcoholism, survived personal tragedies, and in later life faced one of the darkest chapters imaginable. Her only son, John Markle, murdered his wife and 2 daughters before taking his own life in 1987. McCambridge never fully recovered. She passed away in 2004 at the age of 87, leaving behind a career marked by triumph and trauma. For many, she remains the unseen, unforgettable terror of The Exorcist. Her voice crawled into our ears and stayed there. Not just because it was terrifying, but because it sounded like suffering itself. Jack MacGowran, the tragic wit who laughed at the abyss. Jack MacGowran had only a few scenes in The Exorcist, but he made them count. As Burke Dennings, the acerbic, drunken film director who meets a violent end under mysterious, supernatural circumstances, MacGowran injected dark humor and volatility into an otherwise somber narrative. His character's death was the first clear indication that the evil in the house was not only real but deadly. And fittingly, MacGowran's performance would be his final bow. Born in Dublin in 1918, MacGowran was one of Ireland's most distinctive stage and screen actors. He built his reputation performing the works of Samuel Beckett, often playing characters that teetered between absurdity and despair. That theatrical sensibility, where comedy and doom coexist, made him unforgettable. With his gaunt face, expressive eyes, and erratic energy, MacGowran often played eccentrics, fools, or tragic clowns. He was magnetic in roles where others would vanish. In cinema, he appeared in cult classics such as Roman Polanski's The Fearless Vampire Killers and John Huston's Casino Royale, bringing an offbeat charm to every project. He had the rare talent of being both menacing and endearing in the same breath, a gift that elevated even small roles into something memorable. Tragically, MacGowran died shortly after completing his work on The Exorcist in January 1973, at the age of 54. The cause, complications from influenza, worsened by a chronic illness. His death, coming before the film's release, meant he never witnessed the cultural explosion it would become, nor the legacy his final role would leave behind. In a film obsessed with death and damnation, his was the first life taken, on screen and off. Jack MacGowran left behind a body of work that still haunts the stage and screen. And in The Exorcist, he delivered one last reminder that even the most minor characters can leave a lasting chill. Vasiliki Maliaros, the silent mother who broke every heart. She had no formal acting background, no long list of film credits. And yet, in The Exorcist, Vasiliki Maliaros delivered one of the film's most emotionally devastating performances, as the frail, grieving mother of Father Karras. Her screen time was brief, her dialogue minimal, but her presence lingered. She didn't need to say much. Her tired eyes, her trembling hands, her quiet disapproval, they told an entire story of abandonment, guilt, and love unspoken. Born in Greece in 1883, Maliaros was nearly 90 years old when she was cast in The Exorcist. She was not a trained actress. In fact, she had never acted before. Director William Friedkin discovered her in a New York Greek Orthodox community and was struck by her authenticity. She wasn't performing, she was the character. Her scenes with Jason Miller, Father Karras, were deeply human, grounding the film in a reality more painful than any demonic possession. The slow fading of a parent, and the crushing guilt of a child who feels they've failed them. Maliaros's portrayal of Mrs. Karras was not just a subplot. It was the emotional bedrock of her son's psychological collapse. Every time Karras heard her voice, imagined her suffering, or saw her face in his dreams, it reminded the audience that true horror often comes from within. And that's the tragedy Maliaros embodied so perfectly. Tragically, like her co-star Jack MacGowran, Vasiliki Maliaros passed away before the film was released, in February 1973, at the age of 89. The Exorcist would be her first and only film. A brief flicker on screen, but one that left a lasting impression. She came from nowhere, spoke little, and vanished before the world could applaud her. But for those who watched her, and wept with her, Vasiliki Maliaros remains the quiet soul of The Exorcist. The Exorcist is often remembered for its terrifying images: the levitating bed, the spinning head, the voice that growled from deep within a child. But behind those moments were artists. People. Each brought more than just talent, they brought pieces of themselves, their pain, their convictions, their questions, and, in some cases, their own inner demons. Max von Sydow's steady gaze gave Father Moran an immortal strength. Jason Miller's tortured soul bled through Father Karras' every crisis. J Cobb stood as the last barrier of reason, while Mercedes McCambridge lent her body and voice to a presence that would haunt cinema forever. MacGowran and Vasiliki Maliaros, both gone before the film's release, left behind final performances steeped in vulnerability, wit, and aching humanity. And now, as we look back at The Exorcist over 50 years later, it's impossible not to feel the weight of what we've lost. These were not just actors in a horror film. They were storytellers of the human condition, each confronting mortality through their work. Ironically, in a movie about death, damnation, and the unknown afterlife, it is the mortality of its cast that brings it closest to us. Their stories continue, not in screams, but in echoes, in the way they made us feel, long after the credits rolled. To remember them is not just to revisit a great film, it is to honor the fragile, beautiful impermanence of the lives that made it.